a Kangaroo Fern production.
From Manchari Newsroom at redmanchari.com.
2025 Australian Media Landscape Report. And this is coming from the MediaNet.com.au. One of the interesting facts that was unreported is that press release were the second most commonly used story source used by 83% of journalists, including me. So, okay, but before we go ahead, so we're going to discuss a comprehensive um, tackle about this report that was just recently released. And we are happy to tell you that we're able to secure the managing director of MediaNet to discuss about this Australian media landscape report. Please welcome to the show, Miss Amrita, Sidhu. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for having me, Miko. Great to be discussing these really interesting findings. And I'm very pleased to hear that the press release is still very important to you as a source of content. So that's a great start to this conversation.
Thank you so much for it. Yeah, I usually use press release also. I also use the 360 that I think it's under MediaNet as well because it's good on investigative for initial and then you can
Yeah.
dig deeper about this. My first question to you is what motivate the MediaNet to conduct this comprehensive survey of 521 journalists across multiple media sector?
Yeah, thank you, Miko. And look, MediaNet has conducted this survey for a number of years now, 6 or 7 years. We've been conducting a survey of people that actually work in media as journalists and content creators and content producers, rather than at the senior management levels. What we really want to do is we want to be able to give back to the journalism community first, and then also to educate PR and communications professionals about the challenges, the opportunities, the experiences of those that work at our news media coalface. So really our motivation is to create a piece of thought leadership every year that shows the experiences challenges journalists are currently facing, and then give advice and recommendations to our PR and communications clients and partners about how best to build those relationships with the media, how best to achieve earned media pickup. Ultimately, it's about really as well making this report available to those that work in all aspects of the media sector, so they have a really comprehensive understanding of the state of play of the industry.
Could you elaborate on the because there's a 67 decrease in trust that journalists reported and what systematic factor might be contributing to this trend?
Yeah. So trust is a really interesting talking point that's come out of this year's media landscape report and the survey responses that we got from those that participated, the over 521. Right. So there's a general, very strong sense that trust in the media has decreased. And there's a couple of factors to that, right? There's the fragmentation and the dissemination of misinformation and fake news. That's definitely a contributing factor to that. There's also this kind of dichotomy around social media as well that is also contributing to the general trust issue that exists. We have a very large proportion that use social media as a story source as well. 70% are using it as a story source. And then another 60 odd percent, though, are saying that that's contributing to misinformation. That is, social media contributes to misinformation and fake news. So there's a number of layers, I think that relate to the importance of trust and how the media trust relationship is perceived in Australia at the moment.
Thank you for that. So you saying an increase in disinformation or fake news was the biggest threat to public interest journalism
Yes.
identified by the journalists.
Yes,
How do you
75% identified that as a threat. Yes.
how do you interpret the significant 10% drop on X, formerly Twitter, usage among journalists between 2023, I think, to 2024.
Yeah, it's been a real material drop in journalists using Twitter slash X. And I think the interesting thing, though, there is it's not like they stopped using it and didn't find another source. You know, we've had a big growth almost overnight in Blue Sky usage. 16, 17% are now using Blue Sky, almost the same that have abandoned X. So clearly, there's still a desire to have a social platform that journalists can use both for producing content and disseminating content, as well as using as a story source. There's still a need for that. And Blue Sky seems to, in Australia anyway, be filling that gap. While I think the whole trust piece around X has really eroded when it comes to journalists' use on it. There's probably various reasons around there. Mr. Musk has definitely played a role, but probably not appropriate to get into that in this particular conversation anyway.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
So, the report on the show, 88% of journalists express concern about AI impact on
Mm,
journalism
mm.
integrity. What specific, say, mitigation are being considered within the industry?
Yeah. Look, I find this data point, I have to say, and the other data point related to it, which I'll mention in a second, the term I'd probably use is quite paradoxical, right? So you've got 88% who are concerned about the impact of generative AI and large language models in the industry, but you've got 67% that aren't using it. So, you know how there's this whole thought regarding like the fear of the unknown? I think if we had seen high usage and high adoption of AI in newsrooms, and then distrust in it, I think that would be a different talking point in its own way, right? As in they've experimented, they've attempted, they understand that is not going to be an enabler, and yet, in this instance, we have a lot of journalists who aren't using it, but like you said, 88%, are really concerned about what the impact is going to be. And I find that while there might be encouragement at the senior management levels of news organizations to look at AI as a way to make newsrooms more efficient and more productive, the reality is that there isn't, I think, a very strong and consistent use case for how some of these generative models can be used. And the art of journalism is really about the creativity and how you use your brain, not how you get something else to write that for you. And I think that when I look at the free comments, the open comments that were made by those 500 journos, there's a lot that speak to the fact that AI cannot replace the creativity, and the thoughtfulness that a journalist, in the field can actually produce.
Thank you for that. In connection with that AI impact, how concerning is that? Because I think it on the report it says 60% of journalists report losing work or knowing someone who lost work due to AI.
Hmm. Yeah. Look, that's a very early indicator to me that the roles within media may also be changing. So, with that particular data point, if we drill in deeper, it's like a change to work or lost work. That doesn't necessarily mean the role disappeared altogether. It was perhaps a change in the role or in change in the type of role that was being done. Fact checking, I think, is going to be a really interesting kind of, I would like to believe, skill set and how you used different generative AI models to do that. I think, for example, that is going to be a really interesting skill set that's going to need to come into newsrooms in a different way that it used to exist. So I feel like this is a data point now. We've asked this question twice over the last 2 years, and I'm going to be really interested to see how this one evolves as the years progress as well in this report. Yeah.
How do you feel about the Facebook remaining the most used platform by journalists despite concerning about misinformation? Last couple of months ago, I think Meta founder they removing some of the fact checking on
Yeah.
the Facebook.
Yeah. Yeah. It remains the most commonly used platform, Miko, and it has been for a number of years now. It's kind of been at that top spot for a really long time. And so I think that maybe this year's results don't fully reflect any sentiment or opinion about the fact checkers being removed. Now, we conducted this survey in January, so it will be again very interesting to see this result next year when we conduct it, to see whether the removal of the fact checking layer at Meta/Facebook has made a material difference in it being used as the top social media source. But it has held that position for a really long time now. I would say watch this space with blue sky as well, though, and let's see how that shifts over the course of the remaining 8-9 months of the year.
Thank you for that. Let's go to economic realities.
Mhm.
With money cited as a journalist top challenging for 3 consecutive years,
Yeah.
what structural economic shift do you see affecting media sustainability? Because for me, I'm independent journalist. I use Substack for extra
Mm,
money.
mm,
So what do you
yeah, yeah. I have a couple of points on this, Nico, that I think are worth diving into. So you're right. Money was the top challenge, one of the top challenges identified by journalists, and absolutely a number of years in a row now. And you've got 67% of those that responded that feel they were underpaid in 2024. Right, 2/3. That's quite a lot. So, a couple of talking points here. Firstly, I think journalists are being asked to do more and more within the same remuneration structure. So these days, you've got to produce a piece of content for online. You might have to do a quick podcast, as well. You have to repurpose some content from broadcast into something else. So you're being asked to do more. And I feel that generally results in a feeling of being unpaid, because the amount of media output you're now producing, because that's the requirement of your multi-layered media organization, has increased. But yes, we are finding a really nice data point around journalists such as yourself that have moved to things like Substack as a way to supplement, their income. And I believe, I'll just double check this data point, 53% of those that said that they are using these alternative platforms are doing it from an income point of view. That's their primary motivation as well. But we also had, 46% of them that wanted a forum or a format where they could share their opinions and their position on certain things, that editorial freedom that didn't necessarily need to relate back to, their main kind of media organizations kind of editorial process or editorial guidelines. So I think that's really interesting as well.
Thank you so much for that. Let's go to the gender gap pay. So
Mhm.
you already also tackled this one, saying it showed 38% of male journalists earning 100,000 plus compared
Mm.
to 23% female journalists. What initiative might address this disparity?
Yeah. Look, Miko, part of me is disappointed that this continues to come up as a data point year after year after year, and a talking point year after year. I feel like it would be really nice if this didn't happen. The other disparity that does also concern me is the disparity between those that work in metropolitan areas versus those that work in, regional or suburban, or for community organizations, news organizations. I think these kinds of disparities can only be addressed at the senior leadership and business leadership level of organizations. And either there is on the gender aspect, a directive to try and equalize and normalize, or there isn't going to be. But it's very hard for, I think, at the groundswell of any organization to really try and, push that through. I think it has to come from the senior leaders at the media organizations.
Thank you so much for that. Next question I have is, do you agree with the 72% of journalists who consider their reporting is free from bias? Especially now it's on election coverage. There's a lot of fake news happening,
Yeah.
misinformation.
Yeah.
What do you think about this?
Look, I do agree with that. I do believe it. I have to believe it. I want to believe it. So I do believe it. I think the inverse data point is interesting. That means, and it helps my belief, because you then did have journalists that put their hands up and said, no, my reporting is not free of bias. You know, it wasn't like 100% said, yes, it's free of bias. And then we all look at that data point a bit skeptically. You know, you do have that percentage that were open and authentic about the fact that there is a degree of bias in their reporting. It also opens up the debate, and I don't know how you feel about that, Miko, is can any content production ever truly be unbiased to some regard? You know, will a journalist, irrespective of the editorial position of their organization, will they go into any situation with a degree of bias anyway? So, you know, I think this is a good one for a nice roundtable debate over a coffee or something. Absolutely. Yeah, I'm curious if you have a position on this one, actually.
Yeah, yeah. So maybe because of some of them, because there's like a editorial standard, maybe.
Yes. Yes.
So you have to follow. Some of them, they don't want to follow that standard, so they go to other platform. Maybe my last question for you before we wrap up this podcast right now is giving the rise of platform like Blue Sky is achieving 19% adoption in just 1 year. How do you envision the social media landscape evolving for a journalist by 2026?
Yeah, I think it's going to get increasingly fragmented for a journalist. I think it's going to get increasingly challenging for them to stay across all of those platforms and to know which are reliable as story sources and which are authentic as content distribution sources as well. You know, reliability and the management of the fake news or misinformation, disinformation. I think it's really going to be a challenge at an individual journalist level to know which are the social media platforms they should be engaging with and which are the ones that they shouldn't as well. And I really hope that at the management levels of our media organizations here in Australia, they can increasingly give some guidelines and some support and, you know, some best practice into those that are producing this great content so that they know where the reliability and the trust is. We can't control everything, but certainly, you know, we are going to know in the future which are the platforms that we should be more engaging with and which are those that aren't. So I think it will be a challenge, you know, and it will be polarizing, but this is an industry that's made it through a lot. So I am also very confident that over the next year or two, we will find, you know, the right kind of reliability and cadence in the way we work with social media.
Thank you so much for that. Any parting words to our viewer and listener about this report?
I would just say, you know, it's a fascinating piece of content. Please visit our website, medianet.com.au, to download it. And I would love to hear from anyone really who has any thoughts or comments regarding the findings of the report or would like to, you know, contribute and be part of reports in the future. Like I said, it's a really important piece of content. We produce it every year as a way of giving back to the news media industry in Australia, and would really love everyone to be engaging with it.
Thank you so much, Miss Amrita Sidhu, Managing Director of MediaNet. So just go to the website, medianet.com.au, for the full report. Thank you so much for
Okay.
the
Thank
time.
you, Miko. Pleasure to be here with you.
Thank you so much. That's another episode of the expert interview under redmancarry.com. See you again next week for another episode. Thank you.